U.S. Senator J.D. Vance, running mate of Republican presidential candidate and Bible salesman Donald Trump, recently held a rally in Detroit. And among those in attendance at that rally were about a dozen people wearing Auto Workers for Trump t-shirts. And the funny thing about those people is that half of them were not auto workers. According to Craig Mauger of the Detroit News, who spoke to the people in the Auto Workers for Trump t-shirts, 6 of them said they were not auto workers at all, and 2 of them said they'd been given the shirts by the guy who founded the group Auto Workers for Trump, which must be having a hard time meeting its recruitment quota, because otherwise they wouldn't need to hand out shirts to random people to inflate their numbers, would they? Purely in terms of optics, it makes a kind of sense. Trump wants to appeal to working class people, even though his actual policy proposals, to the extent they are coherent at all, favor the wealthy at the expense of the working class. So he encourages working class people to vote for him by creating a fiction that actually a lot of working class people support him already. Auto Workers for Trump being a visible presence at his rallies or J.D. Vance's rallies. That's a part of that strategy. The problem is, the fiction is so poorly crafted that it can be revealed through minimal fact-checking. Like, did no one at the Trump campaign think that a reporter might talk to the people wearing those shirts? The campaign not only should have been prepared for the possibility that reporters would talk to the people in the Auto Workers for Trump t-shirts, they should have expected it, because this is not the first time the Trump campaign has attempted a transparent ruse to manufacture the illusion that Donald Trump is popular with employees of the automotive industry. Last year, during the United Auto Workers strike, Trump gave a speech to a group of auto workers in an attempt to position himself as a pro-worker, pro-union candidate. However, as many outside observers noticed right away, the factory where Trump spoke was a non-union shop. Furthermore, most of the people actually in attendance at the speech didn't even work there. Still, that half-hearted production was practically Gielgud's Hamlet compared to some of Trump's other attempts at political theater. 4 years ago, in the final weeks before the last presidential election, the Washington Post published this piece by Philip Bump about Trump's long-standing attachment to what the article's headline labels paper stack politicking. You might remember some of these, like the time Trump's press secretary presented 60 Minutes correspondent Leslie Stahl with a massive doorstop of a hardcover book which purportedly contained Trump's long-promised healthcare plan. In reality, the book contained copies of healthcare-related executive orders Trump had already issued, not an actual comprehensive plan for reforming the healthcare system. The point of handing Stahl the book was seemingly not to introduce Trump's long-promised healthcare plan, which has never actually existed, but to take these photographs of Stahl holding the very heavy and impressive-looking book so that Trump could then tweet them out as evidence of all the hard work he'd done to fix healthcare. Or the time President Trump staged a media stunt involving a relatively small stack of blank paper and an extremely large stack of blank paper to illustrate the amount of federal regulations there were 60 years ago compared to the amount there were in the present, with the point being that there were too many regulations nowadays, a talking point Republicans have been whining about for as long as I can remember. Then, for some reason, Trump cuts a ribbon that's been strung between the stacks? I know what the 2 stacks of paper are supposed to represent, but what is symbolized by the cutting of the ribbon? Is he opening an Office Depot? Or the time shortly before Trump took office in January 2017, when he held a press conference to announce that he was turning over control of his companies to his sons and offered as proof stacks and stacks of paper in manila folders, which he claimed were, quote, just some of the many documents that I've signed turning over complete and total control to my sons. Except reporters weren't allowed to actually examine the folders, and it sure looks like they were just little stacks of copy paper inserted into those folders. Magic tricks are always more convincing when you let the audience inspect the props. Or how about the time Trump tweeted a photo of himself supposedly writing his inauguration speech with a Sharpie on a pad of paper he was lifting up to hide from the camera, the way you do when you write? Or how about the time he tweeted a photo of himself doing the exact same thing, pretending to write on a blank sheet of paper with a Sharpie to prove that he was still hard at work despite having contracted COVID? Or how about the time during the primary campaign in 2015 when he tweeted out some photos of him supposedly signing his tax return, represented by a massive stack of paper on his desk? A tax return he never actually released to the public, but which the New York Times later learned indicated that Trump paid no federal income tax that year. Or, moving away from the paper stacking, how about his history of laughably half-assed attempts to convince people he's a Christian? Like the time he stood in front of St. John's Church in Lafayette Square after police and the National Guard had tear-gassed a bunch of peaceful protesters who had gathered there and held up a Bible for some reason. When a reporter asked if that was his Bible, Trump replied, "It's a Bible." Or the time he spoke at a Christian conference and read from the Bible and referred to the passage he was reading from as 2 Corinthians. Or the time when he was asked what his favorite verse from the Bible was and he couldn't think of a single one, so he said that he didn't want to share that because it's too personal. You know how devout Christians are always so reluctant to share their favorite Bible verses with people. It's like that. I bring all of this up because, to me, it suggests a question. We know Trump is a phony. It's obvious. It's undeniable. Everyone outside of his cult following knows it. There's not an authentic bone in his body. But why doesn't he try harder at it than this? I don't ask myself why isn't he better at it than this, because I would never expect Donald Trump to be better at anything than he is. Everything he's ever done has been devoid of craft and art and charm, but why doesn't he at least put forth more of an effort? Or tell the people who work for him, who set up these ridiculous photo ops, to put forth more of an effort? The fake auto workers, the stacks of blank paper, the pretended religious faith, they're all such obvious scams from the moment you see them. Why even bother? Same question goes for Trump and Vance's recent obsession with spreading false claims about Haitian immigrants eating people's pets, or the Biden administration intentionally withholding hurricane recovery aid from Republicans. These are examples of disinformation so obvious and so ugly that even other Republicans have spoken out against them, and Trump and Vance and others in their campaign keep saying them. I get that he's a liar, but what's the point of telling a lie that everyone's going to recognize as a lie right away? Why? Sometimes people say stuff that doesn't make sense for no apparent reason. Even people who aren't habitual liars. One of my college English professors, an intelligent, articulate, superbly well-read woman, once told our class that since the debut of Henrik Ibsen's classic play A Doll's House, which was in 1879, no other writer has ever named a character Nora. And I mean, why would she say that? It's obviously not true. Did she actually believe that? How? If she didn't actually believe it, why would she tell it to us as though it was a fact? Nothing about it makes any sense, and I've been baffled by it for, let's just say, many years. And I guess where I've landed with it is that sometimes people say stuff or do stuff that defies explanation. However, in Donald Trump's case, I think there is an explanation. And to go along with every other quality the man possesses, it's an explanation that is simple and obvious. Donald Trump doesn't try any harder at being a convincing phony than he does, because for most of his life, he hasn't needed to. Think about this. Almost every success Trump has ever had is because he told a lie or ran a scam, and people either took him at face value or knew he was full of shit but didn't bother to try and stop him. Either way, in the end, he got away with it. That applies to business, entertainment, politics, any field of endeavor he's ever pursued. He lies, he cheats, he grifts, he takes shortcuts, he steals credit for other people's work. When he gets caught, he deflects, he projects, he accuses the people who caught him of doing the thing they caught him doing. That's why every negative story about him is fake news. Every former employee or cabinet member or close confidant who has talked about what a narcissistic, gullible, fragile, bigoted weirdo he is a fraud. And every criminal investigation into his many alleged crimes is a hoax. He has spent years, I know you are, but what am eyeing his way out of accountability. And so far, it's worked. He's not in prison. He's been ordered to pay millions and millions of dollars in restitution to various people and organizations he or one of his companies has harmed, but he can tie those cases up in appeals for years to come. He might not ever have to pay a dime to anyone. He's once again the Republican nominee for president. He has an alarmingly good chance of being elected to that office again. Why would he ever think he needs to try harder when his standard, barely there level of effort has always been enough? Plus, his supporters eat this shit up. Most Christians who aren't a part of his cult were probably insulted or offended by the shamelessness of him holding up that Bible in front of St. John's Church. But to Trump's supporters, that was a powerful statement. And when he does stuff like the stacks of paper photo ops or the fake auto workers at his rallies, they either take it at face value and don't bother to question or fact check it, or if they do, they spin it as an example of Trump trolling the libs, and they love him even more for it. Some of Trump's diehard followers probably know, either implicitly or explicitly, that he's full of shit. Some of them probably don't. They believe in him the way many of them also believe in the likes of Benny Hinn or John Hagee or Joyce Meyer or Joel Osteen, with the kind of unquestioning faith only accessible to the imperviously credulous and the blissfully ignorant. And truthfully, it doesn't make a difference. Whether they know he's a fraud or not, they're going to vote for him and buy his merch and send him money to support his campaign and his various other scams. And they're going to do all of that because, along with whatever else they might believe, they believe Donald Trump is on their side. That's why he holds up Bibles. That's why he hugs American flags. That's why he promises them everything they want and absolves them of all their sins and assures them that if the world seems scary or confusing, or their kids don't talk to them anymore, or their lives are miserable and unfulfilling, whatever it is, it's not their fault. They, like him, have done nothing wrong. They're the good ones. It's the one thing Trump supporters most want to be true, and Donald Trump tells it to them. And why else would he do that, they think, unless he really cared about them? It's the cruelest and most cynical and most dangerous and most blindingly apparent of all Donald Trump's con jobs, but the marks will never see through it because they don't want to. They'll keep making it easy for him, the same as people like them have always done. They're the reason he doesn't try. They're the reason he's never had to.